Here is the content of the Jadus Ignition Advanced Bracket Kit. In front of us we have two CNC machined aluminium brackets that are specially designed and manufactured for this purpose, and then three fastening bolts. Two that bolt into the original positions and one that holds this bracket here in place. When we get on with the installation, it'll become very clear which goes where, and I'll make that obvious when we do the install. First step is to remove the left side crankcase cover, which is the alternator side. So we're going to remove all of the bolts around here, and in this case we're going to need to remove the foot peg bracket and the gear lever to be able to get that case off. I'll remove this and then we'll take another look. Okay, I've just removed the foot peg and the gear lever bracket, and I just thought this would be a great time to point out that if you're working on old bikes, get an impact driver. This is going to make life so much easier when you're removing bolts like this, especially if they're giving you a bit of trouble. And if you have the original fastenings in place, get a set of JIS bits. If you don't know what they are, look it up. It's super important. Okay, now we have our side cover off, and this is the area that we're going to be focusing on during this install. This is the pickup for the ignition timing, and that registers when this little raised profile here on the flywheel passes by it, and we're going to be moving this in this direction, which means that it'll pick up that signal earlier in the combustion cycle, exactly 5 degrees earlier across the whole RPM range. So instead of 10 degrees initial, it's going to be 15 degrees initial, and then the same for total advance. It'll be 35 instead of 30. So I'm going to remove this now, and this can be quite difficult because these screws sit super tight over time, and they are also, as mentioned before, JIS head screws. So if you have those bits, this will make life a lot easier. And you can see the mechanic before me that's worked on this bike has buggered those heads up good and proper, so they're fucked. I'm going to have a hard time getting them out, but I've got a few tools that should make that possible. I'll get them out and show you how that looks. So with a combination of my impact driver and a little bit of violence, I managed to get those damn screws out, and you can see the head on that is stuffed, but it doesn't matter. Don't care about that. We're replacing them with some nice stainless hardware, so that's fine. With this here, it's actually attached by wires to the inside of the alternator coil, so be careful with those and just push this to the side. I'm going to set this camera up on a tripod now and show you how to put the first bracket in place, which goes in behind here. Almost forgot this super crucial step in the installation process, and that is to install this part of the bracket here. We need to countersink this hole, and that's so that we can screw in this countersink head, and the surface of the head ends up flush with this surface, so that when we bolt this in place, that sits flush on the same level. We are actually going to do that with the tip of a 6.5mm drill bit, and the reason I suggest that is because everybody has one of these if they're working on bikes, and we're just going to sink the tip into place. And this is aluminium, so it's not going to get caught up in the magnets of the flywheel, so you'll just have to clean up after it's done. If you have a countersink bit like this, that's even better. I'm going to set up for doing this drilling and show you how I will do it. As you can see, I've stuffed a rag in here, and that's so that when we drill and we get any chips of aluminium, it's not going to get caught in these greasy parts here of the moving parts and cause wear later down the track. We'll also run the vacuum cleaner over this as well once I'm done, just to make sure we get every single piece. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drill in here, and I'm just going to sink the head in. So that's enough right there. You can see I've just come down into the straight part of the head, so that countersink should be enough. I'll remove the rag and then clean this up with a vacuum cleaner just to make sure that we've got every last piece. Now we've done that, we'll just check that the screw fits, and this is the long M3 countersunk screw which holds the bracket in place. Let's do a trial fit, And yes, that sits nice and flush for when that comes over the top. Okay, the next part of the install is to put this bracket in place, and it sits in this position here, and you can see the profile here matches the profile on this cast aluminium piece. And to make this fit, we need to loosen this screw here and this screw down here. Again, these are JIS head screws, which can be a pain to get out, but be careful and use your impact driver. Loosen those, take them out, rotate this slightly. It's going to give us a lot more space to put this in position. Okay, you can see I've removed those two screws and rotated that aluminium plate around a few degrees, which has given us a nice big space here to be able to install our bracket in its correct orientation. So I'll just poke that in position. It should drop down into place behind here like that, and then we're going to rotate that plate back into position so those holes line up there, and put those screws back in place and do them up tight. Okay, our screws are back in place and tightened up so that that plate is in position and fastened down, and our ignition advance bracket is also in position under there, which you can see. I'm going to fish that up with the M3 screw and then screw it down through that hole in the middle there with the countersunk screw, which holds it in place. It's a bit tricky to show it because of the bracket here, or the pickup is always in the way. So I think the best thing to do is if I put it in position and show you how it should look like, and then you'll have to deduce how I managed to do that. I found this was a good way to do it. Fish up the bracket with a small screwdriver and then place the M3 screw through the hole and start trying to collect that thread through there. And I've actually managed to grab hold of that thread and start pulling it up. So I'll tighten this up, and that should pull this whole bracket into its final position. Just button that up nice and tight so that's not going to go anywhere. And there you see the two different hole centers now. So we move this pickup from here to here, which equates to 5 degrees. I'll give you another couple of views of that. You see that profile matches the cast-in profile, and it should look like that. The next step is to bolt this side of the pickup in place, and we do that with the shorter M3 button head screw with a lock washer so that it takes care of the vibrations and doesn't back itself out. We'll put that in place and screw it down. Once you've screwed that down to the bottom, don't do it up tight yet, because we need to be able to move this round for the other side of the bracket and for adjusting its clearance with the flywheel pickup. Now we come to putting the other bracket in place, which holds the other side of the pickup down. And instead of screwing through this hole, what we've developed is this special adapter here, which has a machined boss on it, which fits inside this hole. It's oblong or oval, and it has a flat which matches the depth and the edge of this metal flange here. So that fits into place there, and then you'll be able to push it down and see the holes line up here, and then in comes the M4 button head screw, also with a lock washer so that it doesn't back out under vibrations, and you should be able to screw that into place. As with the other side of the bracket, we don't want to do this screw up too tight because we want some adjustment here so that we can position this with the right amount of clearance to these bosses here on the flywheel. Now I've tried to set the camera up to give the best angle here to show the clearance that's required, and this is why we've left these two screws here loose so that we can adjust the tolerance and the gap between the pickup here, the plastic boss, the plastic housing, and this boss here on the flywheel. And I've actually pre-installed this, so I've screwed mine into place, achieving a gap of between 0.5 millimeters and 1 millimeter. and that's quite critical. If it's too close, you'll run the risk of interference at high RPMs when things move around, so you'll wear this part out. And on the opposite side of that, you have the risk of having too much gap where this pickup here doesn't get a good enough signal to the igniter coil, and you'll notice that with spluttering and poor engine running when you have the bike operating again. So make sure that this gap is correctly adjusted before doing these two bolts up tight. Well, that wraps up the install really. We've got those brackets in place, everything's bolted down. Now it's just time to put the side cover back on, the gear lever and the foot peg, and Bob's your uncle, job's done. You'll notice a slight pickup in the bottom end in torque, and then as mentioned earlier, better throttle response. Don't expect huge power gains, but it is a nice little mod and it's pretty cheap and pretty easy to install. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, hit us up in the comments or shoot us an email, and happy wrenching and happy riding. Cheers.